All right, welcome back. This is part two of technical debt and approach. We just went over the definitions and examples. Go back and watch that if you'd like. And now we're going to go through an inventory technique. All the experts agree that the most important thing to do if you're feeling like you suffer from technical debt is to begin to inventory the technical debt that you have. This is fairly simple. You make a list and you dump it all out. There's a saying that confession is good for the soul. But just like confession, you want to confess to the right people. You don't want to make this public. So I highly recommend that you keep your list to yourself. Um, Perhaps one day after you've done the list, you'll think you want to share some of the elements of it, and that's fine. Perhaps you want to involve other people in brainstorming additional items for your technical list, and that's fine. But keep this list to yourself. I cannot stress that enough. There is a lot of judgment and finger pointing that can go into these lists, and I will discourage you from doing that. But I have never seen people make lists of technical debt without starting to blame others or themselves, and that can get really touchy. So make a list, and this won't be something you do in one sitting. You will start doing it and you will get tired and you'll stop and you'll come back to it another day. And in between, you'll have thought of three things and maybe you'll jot it down. As you do it, I'm going to suggest that you classify your list by impact to others and that you organize your list by program. So this gets kind of complicated fast. It's not just a Kanban list, but it's a Kanban list with some type of urgency or scope. So that's what we're going to look at next. If you are feeling bad about this whole process, I suggest you go to Org Confessions. It's a website hosted by elements.cloud. It contains 1,100 plus admissions from admins of Salesforce organizations. If you're feeling like, man, nobody would ever do it, make this mistake, and we did, and now we're going to pay some price, go read some of the amazing mistakes that have been confessed by admins on this website. It'll make you feel better. You are not alone. None of us are. All right, how to classify. First, have already suggested that we do it by impact on people. If it really bothers you, but no one else knows about it and no one else cares, that's fine. It's the size of one. I actually have things on my technical debt list that apparently affect no one right now, but I've written them down to sort of remind myself that they exist. Maybe circumstances will change and it will matter in the future. What do you do about special items that your executive director cares about or your boss cares about, but only they care about? I highly suggest you write it down, but you classify it as it affects one person. The scope is not the urgency. The scope is not the prioritization. It's just a objective measure of how many people are bothered by this thing. You may also want to include things like, is it once a year? Is it monthly? Is it weekly? I just suggest using these in the words. New users and every new constituent are special cases. New users need to be pampered and taken care of well, or otherwise they will use your tool poorly. New constituents need to have a great experience, else they will leave. So that's a very high impact. And remember, if it's hurting outside people, that's kind of a big wow and needs special classification. We're going to see these in action in just a minute. The other way I suggest you categorize everything, break it down, is by program area. And this is a little different than you might expect. When you read blog posts out there in the Salesforce world, and I suggest you do, you cannot, if you Google Salesforce technical debt, you will find hundreds of good blog posts. Most of them talk about it from an internal perspective. And I don't think that's a very appropriate way to keep a list for long term. It's not that it's user configuration, and it's not that it's reports, or it's not that it's workflow automation. Those are important categories, but they're important to us, the admins. They're not important to the organization, really. I have listed here a whole bunch of things to start to think about. At its heart, Salesforce is a CRM. It's a Rolodex. And everyone uses that feature in your whole org, probably. If you have technical debt there, you may want to fix it because it probably affects lots of people, but it's kind of a category by itself. A lot of people get Salesforce and NPSP specifically to do development, but I would encourage you to divide development into at least 3 pieces: cultivation, nurturing, and transactional. Transactional is what a lot of people focus on initially. That's recording that the donation actually happened and goes to a certain type of fund and came from that person and happened on this date and was for this amount, and we sent them a receipt and so on. That's transactional. And that's important. But also important is cultivation of new donors, and also important is nurturing of existing donors. So you may find that you have technical debt in any of these areas. Grants, inbound and outbound, are a very near cousin of this. Fulfillment may not be highly utilized in all organizations that use Salesforce that are nonprofit, but ordering literature, donor perk gifts, that free tote bag you get with your pledge, that can be handled by Salesforce and is fulfillment. Volunteers is a big area that a lot of nonprofits use, and you may want to break that down into the needs you have for volunteerism, that process, the transactions of recording that someone did sign up and they did come and they did work, the onboarding of volunteers, the ongoing training of volunteers. In-kind donations is another form of donations. Your needs and your transactions may both want to record there. Newsletters is a special form of outbound marketing, and you may want to record that in Salesforce, and you may have processes and technical debt there. Inbound marketing, what do you do with leads? What do you do with social media interactions? What do you do with forms that are filled out? Programs, this is a big area that NPSP has expanded in. Program management, you have ongoing and one-time delivery of program to constituents. How do you record that? How do you record the impact? Case management, this is a special form of human interaction. How do you record the long-term plans and strategy for helping out a human being with your programs? Service cases, this is much more transactional. A specific problem comes up, a donor has incomplete documentation and they're wanting it to be made complete. That's a case. You can open it, you can service it, you can close it. Quite different than someone who presents as homeless and you develop a whole case management for helping them in a number of ways across a long period of time. HR, hiring, expense reporting, purchasing, contracts, these all may be things that you use inside of Salesforce. Content management, and a brand new category, COVID workplace. You may be screening people, you may have absences, you may have leaves, you may have quarantine requirements. All of this are different programs. And I only mention that to help you understand that when you talk about technical debt, you need to be organizing it and breaking it down to the program area. All right, now we're going to look at my technical debt, and I've chosen to implement it in Trello because it's not in Salesforce. I can control who sees it, mostly me. I can recategorize very easily. I can add new dimensions to it. I can break things down. You don't have to use Trello. Trello is free for private use or individual use. Teams are free up to a point. There are features that you have to pay for. It's kind of a premium paid service if you want. I'm now going to share my screen that is my actual technical debt Trello. I haven't always used it, so it doesn't include everything, but my goal is to confess it all eventually. So here we go. I'm now going to share my screen. I have chosen to put my program areas across the top in what we call lists. So I have an incoming list that means I haven't classified it yet. I have CRM, development transaction, development nurturing. I don't have a lot of cultivation, so I haven't included that list, but you might have lots of cultivation and include that list. I have program delivery, and I have more lists as we go across. Each item represents an element of technical debt, and I have chosen to use little labels to describe the scope of how many people are affected. So let's just take a look at CRM. We're going to see this example later because I have actually addressed it now, but we discovered at the beginning of this year that we have a database element that is flat out broken. The ethnicity string was broken, and it is now fixed, but we don't trust it at this point. It needs to be monitored and it needs to be improved. And we can talk more about that, but it affects lots of people, and it's a standard part. We use it for our programs, we use it for our donors, we use it for our volunteers. We use it to make sure we're being diverse and tracking outcomes across diversity, but we've got a problem and we got to address it. Let me talk about that. I'll show you, we have recurring third parties like Facebook, Benevity, GivePal. They have to be entered in manual batches, and we don't have that set up very well to guide people. That affects one person. It kind of is a big deal because it's making extra work, but it just affects the one person. They're really good at their job, and so there it is. I'll show you this one. I mentioned the donor advised funds are being inconsistently entered now and therefore don't show up on all the receipts, and that affected an external constituent. And this has actually now been fixed a little bit. So I'll be updating this. Now let's see what happens. I've got here's an example of something. You'll notice that I have some incoming ones. Spring 21 has a whole set of new features that have not yet been assessed, and that is incoming, and its scope is completely unknown. I do know that the NPSP attendance feature of the program management module hasn't even been looked into. It came out and we haven't looked at its feature set. It's not on. What's more than that, I will tell you the truth. NPSP release notes for the last 12 months have not been logged in our governance document or explored. If it broke something, we did something about it, but otherwise we really haven't done much. And so I am once again going to add that just so that I admitted it. Confession's good for the soul. And its scope is unknown. Now, let me tell you some of the ones that come up frequently. Lots of unused or infrequently used fields. Spell infrequently used. Okay, so that's one that comes up a lot. Okay, now it's not very specific. It doesn't say who it affects, and it doesn't say what programs it affects. So I really don't recommend that you do this one. I recommend that instead you do something like one that we just discovered. Well, actually, here it is. Mailing address fields are visible when you click edit, even though they are not supposed to be in use. We, at one point, for who knows what reason, added a set of address fields for the account that are custom to our organization. I have no idea why. Maybe we didn't like billing and shipping addresses, but we abandoned them long ago, but there they were. And so we have extra unused fields. They were inconsistently used. And in fact, one person was very dutifully entering all the organization addresses using those fields that we didn't even know we had. And therefore, we were doing double work. We would flag them as important accounts that don't have addresses and make someone else go enter it a second time. So that's an example of how you might do it. It affected a few people. It was in the CRM. So when you say duplicate fields, think about where they are and who they affect and what programs they're affecting, and enter that. Maybe you end up entering, we have a set of duplicate fields on donations that affects development transactions. So we have a set of duplicate fields between development and program delivery that needs to be reconciled. And you put it on every one of these columns, perhaps. But I don't recommend putting this in your field and instead breaking it down a little bit. Another one is users don't do something right. And, that might be a true statement, but I would recommend that you do not record that in your technical debt. Instead, I would suggest that either you write something like, new users are not guided quickly to the best way to enter donations. And they have 3 options readily findable or searchable, readily available, whatever. You have 3 ways to do it, and new users aren't told which one is the right way and aren't guided to the right way. That's a legitimate problem that you might have, and it's a way of saying users don't do the right thing without saying it and without pointing the fingers. The real problem lies in in terms of technical debt, in that you aren't guiding the user to make the right choice. The real problem in terms of technical debt is that you have more than one way to do things, and for some reason you're saying one of them is not as good as the others. If you have multiple ways to do it, either guide the user to do it the right way, or get rid of multiple ways to do it, hide them. So that's another thing that often comes up. Another thing that comes up often is we have unused user licenses, or users no longer here. That's actually true for my organization. Right now, it's affecting no one. It's really a cost issue. I can't add a new user without either fixing this or buying another license. And one of the reasons, the only ones, it's actually, I can get more specific, for admin users no longer here. Processes and scheduled reports are in their name. So these users have been disabled from login, but they're still here because they have automations and report schedules that are in their names running. So it doesn't hurt anyone right now. Maybe it's a cost issue, but it needs to be cleaned up. So I have admitted it now. I'm not sure what category to put it in. I actually have one called, I have one way over here called user administration. And so it probably belongs in that category more than any other. And just since I scrolled, I revealed that there are more here. Program delivery is one category. Program reporting is another. You'll notice I do have development cultivation. I can move that over here with development nurturing if you want. Volunteering, and probably I want that to be broken down eventually, but right now, due to COVID, we don't have a lot of volunteering activity, so I just left it one field. Inbound marketing, outbound marketing, and user administration are my things. I have highly resisted things like adding, we have multiple, it's an opinion that you should only have one process builder per object. I don't know if that's even true, but if you put it in your technical debt, unless it affects a particular program or affects people and is hurting them, you're probably going to end up labeling it none. And I don't mind you doing that, but I think it's a problem that affects none is a whole lot less important than problems that are affecting other people or, heaven forbid, outside users. And I have external, do you see these red ones? I have external constituent affecting technical debt in my org right now. And I need to clean that up. So I hope this helps. Avoid judgment. If you find yourself saying somebody did something wrong, try turning that around and saying our system isn't helping users pick the right thing. Our training doesn't highlight how existing users should migrate to the new way and stop using the old way. Our training doesn't guide new users to the one right way. Things like that. If you find yourself saying you have dirty data, you know, you might break it down and say we don't have systems in place to prevent or detect the entry of a certain type of data in the wrong way or in an inconsistent way. If it's okay to enter data in two different ways, you might say we don't have reporting to report on both ways of entering a certain type of data. Avoid the fingerprinting, avoid finger pointing, avoid just saying it's technical debt because you don't use the tool well. That's not of interest to your organization as a whole. They want to know what programs have technical debt, what's in the way in their program of adding new features and getting better. And break it down if it goes across multiple organizations. The only one that really here touches all organizations is CRM. So that's kind of what I'm doing. Let me stop sharing that now. Assuming I can get back to my Zoom, sorry. All right, let's stop that share and go back to our PowerPoint presentation because I think it stops when I do that. So we've talked about this Trello technique. You could implement it in a spreadsheet. It's just not as easy to move particular items from a row, I think. You could implement it directly in Salesforce, but do remember, I personally think you do not want to share this list. You will share components of it at the right time, but I don't think you want to share this list with anybody but yourself. So if you put it in Salesforce, you know, you're making public data. All right, so we've covered this, how to confess and organize. Next up, we're going to talk about when to work on technical debt. So that's it. Thanks much. Bye.